widespread. It's called the Morrison Formation. And it looks a lot like the Chinle in many places. It's got these beautiful, variegated, sort of pastel-colored shales. And in the Morrison Formation, this has been one of the most spectacular formations on the plateau for finding not just dinosaur, but lots of other things as well. Probably the most famous location in the Morrison for the public is Dinosaur National Monument, right up at the northern edge of the plateau, a place where this, right on the edge of a tilted mountain range, an uplift, there's a whole wall of dinosaur bones that they were excavating for a couple of decades. They've stopped excavating this now, and they're going into other parts of the park and finding some really interesting things. But what we find in the Morrison Formation are an incredible sort of glimpse into a late Jurassic ecosystem that was probably just as varied as the African savannas, the grasslands that you have today. This is a Camarasaurus Skull. Here's the teeth. This guy's an herbivore, but these beautifully preserved, just in their entirety, not just fragmentary. We find remains of Stegosaurus, very famous dinosaur from one of the reasons that this is one of the best known carnivorous, or the best known carnivorous dinosaur in the world, is because of the deposits of a place called Cleveland Lloyd Quarry in Price, Utah. In excess of 12,000 bones have been excavated out of the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry. 70 different individuals, and of those, more than 40 are Allosaurus, and ranging from male, female, young, on up. So they've got a better picture of Allosaurus than any other dinosaur, and certainly any other dinosaur in the world. Again, the Morrison Formation, these rivers, wild-looking cycads here, these things, again, that look like ponds but are not at all related to ponds. Tall conifers, we had ferns, tree ferns, mosses, all kinds of very interesting things in the understory. This is a trunk of a cycad from the Morrison Formation, and you can see all these interesting scars here, what you call leaf scars, but they're not actually. And this guy's about the size of a small watermelon. This is the environment that we think the Morrison, and especially Dinosaur National Monument, was laid down in. These river floodplains and river channels where dinosaurs would die, they'd get washed up on these sandbars and just collect in a jumble of bones. And that's what we're looking at. Now, you also find the Morrison in the Grand Valley near Grand Junction, Colorado, and they're finding some amazing things at some of the sites out there. Some of the tiny, tiny little critters. This one site near Grand Junction at the Fruta Paleontological Area found a little early mammal curled up in a ball about the size of a quarter. And lots of little tiny crocodiles, frogs, turtles, salamanders. It was a really, really rich ecosystem. And we're changing the way we look at dinosaurs in large part because of the information that we're getting from some of these sites. Now this picture, besides being somewhat humorous, shows these dinosaurs dragging their tails along. Well, we now know that even the huge, huge dinosaurs like this guy, it's a little dark picture, but this is Seismosaurus, the longest to date, the longest dinosaur known. Got up to possibly 140 feet long, known from the Morrison Formation on the Colorado Plateau. And even this guy, who probably weighed 20 tons or more, that long, long tail is held out behind it. The reason we know is because we're finding bones along the tail, along the vertebrae of these dinosaurs. Little ossified or bony tendons that go from vertebra to vertebra like struts on a bridge and hold the tail out behind it. The other thing that they used to think that these long necks, like the Diplodocus, the Seismosaurus, the Camarasaurus, some of them, would actually mean, well, you've got a long neck, get up in the trees, why not? It's like a giraffe, you know? So they figured they were up here doing this. Well, now they're looking at the pollen content in their coprolites. They're looking at the kind of vegetation you see here and their teeth. And they think that instead of doing this, they were probably just munching watery streamside vegetation. These are not trees, these are ferns. So while it looks like these are 90 feet high sticking above the forest floor, they're actually just running around, probably munching these watery streamside vegetation, maybe occasionally pushing over a tree like an elephant would do today to get to some of the vegetation. So by the end of the Jurassic in the Colorado Plateau, we had this incredibly varied ecosystem, lots of different creatures. Mammals were still going strong, but teensy, and hanging out at night in most places. Because, you know, you really can't compete with these guys. And when you get to the next time period, you're going to see why they really couldn't compete in certain areas. Now, by the dawning of the Cretaceous period, a profound change had occurred, not just on the Colorado Plateau, but worldwide. And you'll notice that a lot of the pictures I've shown you before had none of these colorful things around here. And probably in the very beginning of the Cretaceous, it didn't look exactly like this either. But what we start finding in the beginning of the Cretaceous period, the last period of the Mesozoic, is the rise of flowering plants. Prior to the very latest part of the Jurassic, flowering plants were not known at all. And they really took off in the Cretaceous. By the end of the Cretaceous, by 65 million years ago, they made up about 90%, and they still do today, of the plants on the Earth today. So these guys were, we start seeing them appear. Now, Cretaceous rocks, you find up here, Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument has fantastic stuff. Black Mesa, up here, Mesa Verde and the San Juan Basin, and then up here, along the Book Cliffs, Road Cliffs, and up in towards around the Uinta Basin, you find Cretaceous Age rocks. One of the most interesting things that we find, here's the beginning of the Cretaceous, and you see again these highlands are eroding, rivers flowing out towards the north and towards the east, heading towards this shallow marine area here. And along these rivers lived an amazing variety of dinosaurs and other creatures. Now, I'm throwing this in to remind myself to talk about this formation. This formation I'm going to talk about, it nowhere exists in this picture. But we do find it right around Arches and Canyonlands National Park down near Moab. It's called the Cedar Mountain Formation. I'm talking about this because prior to about 20 years ago, the Cedar Mountain Formation was considered to be completely barren of fossils. Part of the reason is because people will go trotting by on a horse, look down and go, nope, no fossils there, and they head off in to go look at the Morrison. Well, paleontologists today are saying, forget the Morrison, the Cedar Mountain is where it's at. This formation has single-handedly filled in our knowledge of life on the Colorado Plateau between about 110 and 120 million years ago, the early Cretaceous. Prior to that, we knew nothing about the early Cretaceous in this region, and we start finding some really interesting things. We find the Cedar Mountain Formation up near Dinosaur National Monument as well. But this area has yielded some fantastic creatures. Eolandia is the very first duck-billed dinosaur in the world. Apparently the duck-billed dinosaurs arose on the Colorado Plateau, known from the Cedar Mountain Formation. So this is the earliest duck-billed dinosaur. We find the earliest members of the armored dinosaurs. This is Gastonia, with these little artillery, little club-like end of the tail, and these little tank-like critters with spikes on them. Deinonychus is known from the Cedar Mountain Formation. Deinonychus is one of the group sort of informally called the raptors, with this big slashing toe claw on the inner toe of each foot. And what they would do is grab their prey with their arms, and then just like your cat does, go up like that and gut them with this toe claw. Now, Deinonychus looks like a pretty gnarly critter. He's a little bigger than Velociraptor, you know, made famous by Steven Spielberg. But the coolest raptor ever to terrify an herbivore. He doesn't look so cool here because it's kind of a weird drawing, but Utah raptor was found first in the Cedar Mountain Formation right around Moab, and this guy, his slashing claw was 12 to 14 inches long.